Somewhere west of Wall Street is where my heart and soul reside. Thanks for riding along with us as we explore another trail somewhere west of Wall Street. Today, we're in western Missouri, near the town of Kearney, and we're at the birthplace of one of the Old West's most famous outlaws. When we come back, I'll tell you all about him. Somewhere West of Wall Street is brought to you of Texas Tech University in Lubbock, Texas. The National Ranching Heritage Center tells the story of ranching west of the Mississippi River through 50 structures that document the establishment of the ranch, and stories of the men and women who created the cattle industry in the great American West have captured the hearts and minds of people across the world. As a viewer of my show, I know that you believe in preserving our wonderful ranching heritage. You can help preserve our history by joining me as a member of the Ranching Heritage Association. Visit ranchingheritage.org. Come experience the real West at the National Ranching Heritage Center in Lubbock, Texas.
So Jardiance asks, when it comes to type 2 diabetes, are you thinking about your heart?
Well, I'm managing my A1C.
Effects including dehydration. This may cause you to feel dizzy, faint, or lightheaded, or weak upon standing. Ketoacidosis is a serious side effect that may be fatal. Symptoms include nausea, vomiting, stomach pain, tiredness, and trouble breathing. A rare but life-threatening bacterial infection in the skin of the genital area could also occur. Stop taking Jardiance and call your doctor right away if you have symptoms of this bacterial infection, ketoacidosis, or an allergic reaction. Symptoms of an allergic reaction include rash, swelling, and difficulty breathing or swallowing. Do not take Jardiance if you are on dialysis or have severe kidney problems. Other side effects are sudden kidney problems, genital yeast infections, increased bad cholesterol, and urinary tract infections, which may be serious. Taking Jardiance with a sulfonylurea or insulin may cause low blood sugar. Tell your doctor about all the medicines you take and if you have any medical conditions.
So, what do you think? Now I feel I can do more to go beyond lowering A1C.
Ask your doctor about Jardiance today.
What kind of world do you want to live in?
I want to bring families closer together.
I want to bring pride back to our community.
You've got the power, we've got the tools.
Jesse James is arguably the most famous outlaw that emerged in what we call the Old West, that period between the Civil War and about 1895. Jesse was born in this house here in Clay County, Missouri, near what is today the town of Kearney, on September the 5th, 1847. Missouri at that time shared characteristics of both North and South, but 75% of the state's population was from the South or another border state, and that especially held true in Clay County. It, in particular, was strongly influenced by the Southern culture of its rural pioneer families. Many of the families there had slaves. As a matter of fact, the county had more slaveholders and more slaves than most other regions of the state. As a result, the area became known as Little Dixie. Jesse's father, Robert, was a farmer, raising commercial hemp, which was used in rope making. The large ropes were used along the Missouri River to tie up the steamboats as they docked. But Robert was also a Baptist minister, and he helped found William Jewell College in Liberty, Missouri. In the late 1840s, Robert felt called to go to the California gold fields, both as a prospector and to minister to the spiritual needs of the miners. However, he died of cholera while in California. Jesse was only 3 years old. And after Robert's death, Jesse's mother, Zerelda, in 1852, married Benjamin Sims. But Sims died not too long after their marriage, and in 1855 she married Dr. Reuben Samuel, who moved into the James family home. And from Zerelda's first husband, Jesse had an older brother, Frank, and a younger sister, Susan. But Zerelda and Dr. Samuel had 4 more children together. When the Civil War broke out, Missouri was divided, with some of its citizens siding with the North and some with the South. Guerrilla warfare gripped the state, and atrocities were committed by both sides. Confederate guerrillas murdered civilian Unionists and executed prisoners. The Union presence enforced martial law with raids on homes, arrests of civilians, summary executions, and banishment of Confederate sympathizers from the state. Due to their Southern heritage, the James Samuel family sided with the Confederates at the outbreak of war, and Jesse's older brother Frank joined a local Confederate Army company and fought at the Battle of Wilson's Creek in August 1861. In early 1863, Frank joined Confederate guerrilla commander William Clark Quantrill, who became famous for terrorizing both Union civilians and soldiers. And later that year, a Union militia company raided the James Samuel farm looking for Frank's group. They tortured Dr. Reuben Samuel by repeatedly jerking him into the air with a rope hanging from a tree limb, and a trooper grabbed a pregnant Zerelda and slammed her into a wall. When they found Jesse in a field working a team, they beat him unconscious with bayonets and plow lines. That was all it took. Soon, 17-year-old Jesse joined his brother, first in a guerrilla squad commanded by Fletch Taylor, one of Quantrill's lieutenants. When Taylor was severely wounded, he and Frank joined another guerrilla group led by William Bloody Bill Anderson, who was the most feared of all the guerrilla leaders. When Anderson was killed, Jesse followed one of Anderson's lieutenants, Archie Clement. During the war, Jesse received 2 severe chest wounds, but recovered from both. He recovered from the second one at his uncle's boarding house in Harlem, Missouri, where he was tended to by his first cousin, Zerelda Z. Mims. She, of course, had been named after Jesse's mother. That began a 9-year courtship, which ended with the 2 of them getting married. When the war was over, Missouri remained deeply divided. Anti-slavery Unionists who were members of the Republican Party passed a new state constitution that freed Missouri's slaves. It also temporarily excluded former Confederates from voting, serving on juries, becoming corporate officers, or preaching from church pulpits. Also, unlike soldiers in the regular Confederate Army, pardons did not apply to ex-guerrillas. As a result, there were widespread clashes between veterans from both sides of the war. Jesse's former commander, Archie Clement, kept his bushwhacker gang together and began to harass Republican authorities. They were the likely culprits in the first daylight armed bank robbery in the United States during peacetime, the robbery of the Clay County Savings Association in the town of Liberty, Missouri. That was on February 13, 1866. During the gang's escape from the town, an innocent bystander, a student at William Jewell College, was shot dead on the street. And although positive identification was not made, it is likely the James brothers were in on the robbery, and there's some speculation that they were the leaders. More robberies followed, and after state militia killed Clement, some of his gang stayed together and continued to rob banks. That included Frank and Jesse James. On May 23, 1867, the gang robbed a bank in Richmond, Missouri, in which they killed the mayor and 2 others. An eyewitness who knew the brothers recognized Jesse and Frank among the robbers. Then in 1868, Frank and Jesse joined Cole Younger in robbing a bank in Russellville, Kentucky. Younger had been a member of Quantrill's group with Frank and had joined the James brothers when they went with Bloody Bill Anderson. In just a moment, we'll return with more of the story of the most famous outlaw in the history of the post-Civil War West, Jesse James. We'll be right back. If you have a reason to buy or sell a farm, ranch, or country home anywhere in
RFD-TV, rural America's most important network.
Jesse did not become well known until December the 7th, 1869, when he and Frank robbed the Daviess County Savings Association in Gallatin, Missouri. Jesse is believed to have shot and killed the cashier, Captain John Sheets, because he thought he was Samuel P. Cox, the militia officer who had killed Bloody Bill Anderson during the Civil War. Jesse claimed he was taking revenge, and the daring escape he and Frank made through the middle of a posse shortly afterward attracted newspaper coverage for the first time. Meanwhile, the James brothers joined with Cole Younger and his brothers John, Jim, and Bob, as well as Clell Miller and other former Confederates, to form what became known as the James Younger Gang. With Jesse as the most public face of the group, the gang carried out a string of robberies from Iowa to Texas and from Kansas to West Virginia. They robbed banks, stagecoaches, and a fair in Kansas City, often carrying out their crimes in front of crowds and even hamming it up for the bystanders. On July 21, 1873, they turned a train robbery, derailing a Rock Island Line train west of Adair, Iowa, and stealing approximately $3,000, which would be about $61,000 today. In their train robberies, they held up passengers only twice, choosing instead to take only the contents of the express safe in the baggage car. John Newman Edwards, who was editor and founder of the Kansas City Times, was a former Confederate cavalryman, and he made sure to highlight the fact that passengers were not bothered when creating an image of Jesse as a kind of Robin Hood. However, despite public sentiment towards the gang's crimes, there is no evidence that the James gang ever shared any of the robbery money outside of their personal circle. This sentiment of supporting the James brothers was strengthened even more in 1875. The Pinkerton National Detective Agency had been involved in the hunt for the James Younger gang since 1871. A couple of Pinkerton agents were killed in their pursuit of the gang, and then Allen Pinkerton, the agency's founder and leader, took on the case as a personal vendetta. He began to work with former Unionists who lived near the James family farm, and on the night of January 25, 1875, he staged a raid on the homestead. Detectives threw into the house an incendiary device that exploded, killing Jesse's young half-brother Archie and blowing off one of Zerelda Samuel's arms. Many residents were outraged by the raid on the family home, and the Missouri State Legislature almost passed a bill that would have praised the James and Younger brothers and offered them amnesty. Also in 1874, Jesse and his cousin Z married on April 24th. They had 2 children who survived to adulthood: Jesse Edward James, who was born in 1875, and Mary Susan James, who was born in 1879. On September 7, 1876, the James Younger gang attempted a raid on the First National Bank of Northfield, Minnesota. The robbery quickly went wrong, however, and after the robbery, only Frank and Jesse James remained alive and free. The gang attempted to rob the bank in Northfield at about 2 p.m. 3 men entered the bank, 2 guarded the door outside, and 3 remained near a bridge across an adjacent square. The robbers inside the bank were stopped short when acting cashier Joseph Lee Haywood refused to open the safe, telling the robbers that it was secured by a time lock. It wasn't, but Haywood stayed with his story even after they cracked his skull with a pistol butt. Meanwhile, the citizens of Northfield grew suspicious of the men guarding the door and raised the alarm. The 5 bandits outside fired into the air to clear the streets, driving the townspeople to take cover and fire back from protected positions. They killed 2 bandits and wounded more in the barrage. Inside, the outlaws turned to escape, and one of them shot cashier Haywood in the head. The gang barely escaped Northfield, leaving 2 dead companions behind. The James brothers split from the others and escaped to Missouri, but in the massive manhunt that followed the robbery, the militia soon discovered the Youngers and one other bandit, Charlie Pitts. In a gunfight, Pitts died and the Youngers were taken prisoner. Except for Frank and Jesse, the James Younger gang was destroyed. Although there was $15,000 in the bank, the robbers got away with only $26. Later in 1876, Jesse and Frank surfaced in the Nashville, Tennessee area, where Jesse changed his name to Thomas Howard and Frank became B.J. Woodson. Frank seemed to settle down, but Jesse remained restless. He recruited a new gang in 1879 and returned to crime. But the new gang was not made up of battle-hardened guerrillas. They soon turned against each other or were captured. By 1881, with local Tennessee authorities growing suspicious, the brothers returned to Missouri where they felt safer. Jesse moved his family to St. Joseph, Missouri in November 1881, not far from where he had been born and reared. Frank, however, decided to move to safer territory and headed east to settle in Virginia. They intended to give up crime. With his gang nearly annihilated, Jesse trusted only the Ford brothers, Charlie and Robert, and for protection, he asked them to move in with him and his family. But by that time, Bob Ford had conducted secret negotiations with Missouri Governor Thomas T. Crittenden and was planning to bring in Jesse. On April 3, 1882, after eating breakfast, the Fords and Jesse went into the living room. Jesse noticed a dusty picture above the mantel. He walked across the room, laid his revolvers on a sofa, and then stepped up on a chair to clean the picture. As he stood there, wiping away the dust, Robert Ford drew his weapon and shot Jesse in the back of the head, killing him instantly. It's been more than 135 years since Jesse was killed, but yet his legend is probably as strong today as it ever was. When we come back, we'll take a look around Jesse's birthplace and we'll visit with Beth Beckett, who is a director here at the Jesse James Farm and Museum. We'll be right back. I'm so proud to introduce you folks to the director of the historic site, the James Farm. Her name is Beth Beckett. And Beth, I thought it was very unusual, but yet very human that Zerelda would plant Jesse in her front yard so she could keep an eye on him.
She did. I think she was really concerned about people trying to dig up Jesse after the world knew who he was, after he was killed. So she thought if she would bury him in her front yard, she could sit in her bedroom, watch out the window, and watch over his grave.
Now, that grave was moved.
Yes.
To Kearney.
Yes.
And this tombstone behind us is what's left of that original tombstone that was in Zerelda's front yard.
It is.
And did people just come around and just knock chips off of it? Is that what?
I think he was so popular, and people liked the history so much, they would chip away at that tombstone to take a little souvenir home with them. And that is what's left of the original.
Tell us about the museum today, and how many people do you get and where they come from?
Okay. We get visitors from all over the world. Last year we had visitors from all 50 states and over 40 foreign countries.
Jesse's place will always be revered because of the problems that were brought to him and his family. He was retaliating in most people's mind. He was just getting revenge. Yes. And revenge, as we both know, is not a good thing either. They say revenge is that dark room where negatives are developed.
Yes.
And so, you know, we have a lot to learn about history.
I always thought if Reverend James, their father, he went to California to the gold rush to preach to the miners. I always wondered if he would have come back, if we would have had Frank and Jesse as we know them today. I think things might have been different.
Well, you got a hard-shell Baptist preacher talking to you. You pay a little bit more attention.
Yes, yes.
Well, how can folks find this location on the website? Because I want everybody that's watching us to put this on your vacation list and make it a part of the things you see when you're on vacation, because it's very interesting. Your children should see it. Your children should learn from the conflict that was created and what kind of folks it created and what kind of, how it demolished a part of our civilization. So tell the folks how they get here.
We are located just north of Kansas City, Missouri, right off of Interstate 35, just 4 miles. We are open year-round, so you are welcome to come almost any day of the year. We're only closed 4 days of the year, but just north of Kansas City. There is a website, jessejamesmuseum.org, and you can find information there. And you can also find us on Facebook at Jesse James Birthplace. So we'd love to have you come visit.
jessiejames.org. Now that's real simple. So there's no reason why you can't stop by this part of Missouri and visit this beautiful museum. Thank you so much for letting us visit with you.
You're welcome. Thank you for visiting today.
You bet. You folks stay with us. We'll be right back.
The Texas and South